We always thought alien life would come from the stars. But it came from deep beneath the Pacific.
What the hell is going on?
Hello, Daniel here.
And Luke.
Luckily enough, last week you and I saw footage from Pacific Rim, which is the new movie by Guillermo del Toro, in which aliens land on Earth, but not from the stars, from a portal under the sea, and for human beings to survive, they create gigantic robots, which they control, kind of like avatars, but from within the robots themselves.
Yeah, 2 of them at a time, right?
Yeah, so they kind of link up, and we saw about 10 minutes worth of footage.
Yeah, I think so, and some of the scenes were slightly truncated because they didn't want to show us too much, but yeah, and I think we got quite a good feel for it.
Yeah, so we're going to share what we basically thought of the movie from that footage. So, what did you think going into the footage?
I was a little bit kind of sceptical because I don't like Transformers, like the franchise, it just doesn't really do anything for me, but what I quite liked seeing here is that it's kind of more of a parable about humanity, so it's not just kind of big robots fighting and blowing stuff up. That is there and that is cool, but there's more to it than that. So I really like that aspect of it, and it's actually kind of made me more excited to see it because there does seem to actually be some meat there behind the kind of explosions.
Yeah, I think if Guillermo del Toro wasn't attached to this project, I think you'd perceive it in a slightly different way because it is such an absurd concept. It's gigantic robots fighting gigantic aliens.
Yeah.
But it commits to the premise so fully, and I think the thing that really distinguished it for me was the design of everything.
Yeah.
Everything's really, really thoughtful. Del Toro is really famous for keeping very detailed journals in which he minutely draws all the creatures that populate his movies. And I think that's really apparent in the kaiju, which are the intergalactic monsters.
The monsters, yeah.
So we saw a couple of monsters in the movie.
We did. One was called Leatherback or something.
Yeah, and there was another kind of crab-like creature.
Yeah.
What did you think of the actual monster designs?
I thought they were great because originally I was a bit kind of sceptical that they weren't going to look that different. But I mean, again, like you said, they already seem to have personalities and stuff, which is fantastic. I mean, I really came into it thinking the trailer didn't do it justice. Really, I think the trailer does actually pitch it quite heavily as an action film.
Yeah, and it looks like the movie I'd make as a 7-year-old.
Yeah. And then you actually see just everything, from the way it's shot and stuff, and the way it plays out, and the colours and everything. It's actually really, really, there's a lot of kind of merit there, I think.
I think there's a lot of design behind the movie. I think Del Toro said he wanted to create a rusted future, so that's very common from things like Star Wars.
Yeah.
The Alien movies, to make a very lived-in, dirty, rusted, believable future, not this kind of antiseptic, clean, sterile future. So there's that in it, but Del Toro's a huge horror buff. He loves horror fiction. He's kind of into sci-fi, kind of into fantasy, but horror is the thing that's always dominated his life. So all these early movies, Kronos, The Devil's Backbone, Pan's Labyrinth, horror suffuses them.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest influences on Del Toro is Lovecraft, and that was really apparent, the fact that aliens come from another portal, and they kind of mix up recognisable types of earthbound biology. So you've got bits of crustaceans, bits of tentacles, and he takes existing animals and kind of melds them all together and then scales them up to a terrifying scale. So I thought the aliens were great.
Yeah, I love that.
But then moving on to the robots, what do you think of them?
Yeah, well, we saw a little bit, we saw kind of like their home base where there was loads of, all of the different robots were kind of
Yes, I get the impression from what we saw that Earth is really up against it.
Yeah.
So they've been battling these aliens that keep coming into our world for generations, and they've gone through so many robots, and they've realised they need to make a final stand, so they're kind of assembling all these great robots from different countries.
Yeah.
So there's one from China, one from Australia.
There's a Russian pair, aren't there? It's quite interesting, what I liked about what we saw, I mean, the robots, they're all different, and again, like you were saying, he's kind of already established that they all have different, backstories, different models, some were decommissioned, all of this, and also the way they link with their pilots, I found that quite interesting, the different kind of pilots. So I was quite impressed by that. And I think it's going to be interesting to see, because we saw a brief fight, but we haven't seen all of them in action. So I think the weaponry and how they work differently. That could be quite.
So one of the things that we saw that I didn't realise from the trailers or anything I've read is each robot is piloted by a pair.
Yeah.
Well, I think the Chinese robot is by triplets who work together, or whether
I'm
it's
not
two
sure.
at a time.
That wasn't clear. But.
And so what it is, the two pilots have to be in kind of mental alignment. So they almost have to give their unconscious to the robot, otherwise repressed memories can kind of influence the way the robot controls.
Yeah, as far as I understand, it's their memories kind of flow back, and they remember everything that's happened to them, and they share memories, and they've just both kind of got to sit there in the stream and kind of just let it happen. And the second that it doesn't, like, one of the things we saw was when someone gets stuck. And it kind of pulls them out, and then one of them gets stuck in the other's memory, and it's all
there's loads of weird Inception kind of flashback elements where you're inhabiting other people's consciousness. So that I'd never seen before, so I think that's going to actually be a big part of it.
And that looked really exciting as well. Like, again, just the way it shifted from them being inside the robot controlling around to this memory, and then them inhabiting that. That was beautifully shot and kind of realised. And so I'm really excited about that.
And also there's a lot of variation, I think, in the movie. One of the scenes we saw was when one of the big famous robots, this one that's battled many kaiju called Gypsy Danger, gets destroyed, and it's actually entirely in snow, because this is a very colourful movie and a very vibrant movie. But in that scene, it's entirely muted, all the colours taken out, and everything's in white, and you see this gigantic machine crashing down on a snowy beach, which is really, I think, it's going to be great visual variety in this movie. So we keep saying Transformers.
We do.
I think people who don't know about the project might think it's Transformers. I actually think, in terms of action, it's way more exciting than Transformers, because it's kind of smart action. It's not just noise.
Well, because we saw one of the battles as well, didn't we? And it's interesting because, you have the cockpit shots as well, which is quite interesting. So you actually see them, in there thinking about what to do, moving in unison and everything. And there's something just quite cool about them moving in sync.
Because one of the problems I always think with Transformers action is they have to
explosions,
stop it from becoming so kind of inhuman and faceless. They have to cut between the human characters, which are having a battle on a very small scale level, and the robots, which are like just kicking the crap out of each other. Whereas in Pacific Rim, you're only focusing on the robots, and the scale of it's just brilliant, because it's even bigger than Transformers. These are much bigger robots, and they're picking up things like tanker ships and using them as swords, and using containers from container ships as kind of like bricks to smash in each other's faces.
And again, it comes back to the monsters kind of have personalities as well, so that it's not. It feels a bit sterile, Transformers, I always find. You have the explosions, but there's no kind of interaction or character there. Whereas here, it really did feel like a massive battle, and with a lot of personality and a lot of feeling behind it, which I thought was great.
Right, so that's what we thought of Pacific Rim. That comes out in Australia on the 11th of July, and in the UK and US on the 12th.